One of the things I wanted to do before I do my presentation, I feel really inspired by all of you who have come here, especially our First Nations. And I was also inspired by what Yellow Quill's doing, because I know how that is and how difficult it is with our people to make these decisions. And like we heard in the comments of the elder that came and did the prayer, is that we're facing many challenges and obstacles. And what I see in Yellow Quill is that they stepped forward, they stepped up to take responsibility for what we're talking about, this water. And I know that's not easy to do, because we're dealing with all the symptoms of colonization. We're dealing with internalized oppression. We're dealing with a lot of things that just beats us down as First Nations, as Indigenous peoples, as Native peoples. And to stand up and to speak in front of a lot of people, Native and non-Native, takes bravery. And I've seen people have stepped up to speak about what they've done. So I wanted to start out with a song for them that we have back home. And this song talks about what we're doing here. We're dealing with something that is sacred to us. It's one of the sacred elements, water. So as we pray out, we cast out our thoughts, we cast out our prayer, we cast it way out beyond the cosmos, into that spiritual realm, that spiritual world. It's like a prayer we're casting out in hopes that in return would be that answer. So that's what this song is in honor of the Yellow Quill. So I'm going to sing this song, please. Excuse me before I start here. Maybe you could stand for the Yellow Quill people. Thank you. As I started to do this work, I used to just come up and speak like I'm doing right now, but every year that went by, it's like there's so many issues related to the environment, and I can just lay out all the different issues that are confronting our people. So I found that during the past couple of years, I started to take notes. There's little cards. Then I found out I started writing little on sheets of paper, and now I'm using PowerPoint. So it works. It's one of the tools we use. I'm from Minnesota, and I live up at the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And I'm Bedawakaton, Dakota, and I'm also Dene, or Dene, as they say up here, Navajo. My mom's Navajo, and my dad's side, and is Dakotas. So we have a lot of relations up in Canada. We have a history that a lot of our people went to the north. And some of you are here. Hello. It's good seeing you. And water is the center of who we are, and one of the things I want to talk about. A little bit about our network. We are a community-based network of grassroots Native peoples that came together all even before 1990. It was really out of the same passion, the same fire that a lot of you people are coming here to address, this need to protect our future generations. In our own history in the States, as they say, the States, we were getting approached by many private companies to locate landfills, toxic landfills, and incinerators on our lands because there were a lot of loopholes, because we were in economic dire straits. So it was our communities that stepped forward and said, we don't want this. And we educated our tribal leaders about this as well, because we did not have information. The information that flowed to our communities came through the federal government. And we were very vulnerable as Native communities because we needed money. We always need money for jobs, for housing, for all those programs that we need. So when a company comes approaching our communities with these get-rich schemes, that they need either our natural resources or they need to utilize our land for a municipal solid waste dump, and they're making promises. Yes, we're cautious, but sometimes we give in because we are a culture of givers living amongst a culture of takers. I've heard this term, I don't know who said it, but it struck out at me. We are a culture of givers living amongst a culture of takers. So our history comes from the grassroots. And I just wanted to say a couple of the goals is to educate and to empower our people. Like that, what I felt here, the empowerment of the Yellow Quill community, and to protect our circle of life. That's the center of who we are. And in this process, we reaffirm who we are. However you define that, who are we? And what is our values? What is our language? What is Indigenous thinking? What is Cree thinking? What is Nakota thinking? What is that? So we reaffirm our own understanding of the natural laws. And through that process, reaffirm what is our community and what kind of community do we want to have. Sustainable lifestyles, and an economic system that is healthy for our people and our future generation. And a commitment in the work that we do to influence the decision makers, whether it's in provincial, whether it's federal, whether it's a municipality, because at some point, what the municipalities do or don't do does impact our environment as First Nations peoples. And to include our youth and elders. One of our youth is coming up here later this week for another venue, Heather Milton Lightning. And she has been involved with the Aboriginal youth movement in Winnipeg years ago. We're committed, and she's an organizer that's working with youth in Canada and US, getting our youth organized on these environmental issues. And we also apply the rights-based approach to human rights. This is a human rights issue, what we're talking about. And woven into human rights is our First Nations rights, our treaty rights. It's going to go by real fast. I couldn't stop that one. But some of the programs we do is we work on climate change. We work on globalization issues. We work on toxics and environmental health. We work on what we call a native energy campaign. We work on also mining issues, oil, gas, coal bed methane. A lot of these issues that our communities are confronted with in the water. And a couple of years ago, as we started to build this foundation of working with our local communities, because that's who we are, we found out that there's a tool that we can utilize by taking our issues to the international community within the United Nations mechanisms. We find in our work at the local, which is the key, is the foundation of our work, is the local communities. Some of the struggles we deal with as First Nation people, as Native people in the States, are political struggles around the rights, land rights, water rights, around getting the necessary funding to implement our programs. There's many different layers of issues that we're confronted with. And in this struggle that we have, there's issues of racism. There's old issues between white, Native issues. There's issues where our local governments, whether it's provincial, whether it's federal, does not want to recognize the needs that we have as First Nations to build our communities. There are some areas in this North America where there are communities and leadership who feel they have exhausted local remedy at the domestic level and have gone to the international level. And that's where our network started to see that within the United Nations there are environmental venues where decisions are being made on a global scale concerning climate change, global warming, toxics, and that we found that as we looked at those venues, those United Nations meetings where they're talking about these environmental issues, there's no Indigenous peoples there, no Native people there. So that's how we started to get involved in an international arena. And we got involved with the legal, the UN had a meeting they started in 1998 in Montreal. It was the first meeting to start to negotiate on what to do with these 12 chemicals. POPs. Anyone knows what POPs is? What does POPs stand for? Persistent organic pollutants. Chemicals that are persistent in the environment. A lot of what Dr. David Zuki said on the first day, in fact, that was my presentation. We have a lot of similar perspectives in our work. He mentioned POPs. He mentioned biomagnification, bioaccumulation, that there are certain chemicals in the environment that are released by industrialized countries. The processing of plastics, the processing of making the paper white from the use of chlorine, PVC, vinyl. He mentioned Rachel Carlson. This is one of the issues we jumped into. We took our local issues on the POPs issue because we found it was our communities who are disproportionately impacted, that our exposure to these chemicals were killing our people, that we are at a higher risk because of our close relationship to the environment. We have a land-based culture. We have a water-based culture. And a lot of the studies that are done in Canada and US don't really take that into consideration as they develop laws and ways to manage these chemicals. They don't take our issues into consideration. So we put a face to this issue, and that's where we found that many of the environmental organizations that were working at international level, they didn't really have a community-based perspective. And when we got involved, we put a human rights face to the issue of POPs. The Inuit were very strong as they worked with us, the ICC, Inuit Circumpolar Conference, especially the Canadian ICC. We're very strong. We stood side by side as we went through years of negotiation on POPs. Other venues that we got involved with, I mentioned the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UN Commission on Sustainable Development, the US Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Working Group on Indigenous Populations, and the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Every one of these venues has an Indigenous caucus of people like yourselves. Our network makes sure that as we go to these meetings, we bring impacted communities to these meetings who speak for themselves. Again, putting a face to the issue. But we also bring our resource people, our technical people, to these meetings. That from the academic community, our native indigenous scientists. So we have grassroots, traditional perspective, and modern technical perspectives at these tables. The Permanent Forum on Indigenous Rights, in fact, one of the members of that is Willie Littlechild. I believe he's from Alberta. He's involved with that. I just want to put something real quick here and talk about native territories. Just think about this one. The need for our people, First Nations, to define our biological regions. Because as we define what is our biological region, that strengthens our sovereignty. That strengthens our self-determination. That strengthens our treaty rights. Because that also defines jurisdictions. A biological jurisdiction that we depend on to survive. It just doesn't end at that little boundary. It's a biological region that sustains us. Some of our people, especially of the Six Nations, they've utilized the terminology of Turtle Island. We're a small land base in the oceans. Water is life. As Bidewakantawa people, we are the 7 clans of the Dakota Nation, Nakota, Lakota Nation. We are the Eastern Band. We are the eastern door of the Dakota, the Sioux Nation. Our physical essence is connected to this water. Self, who we are, defines who we are through that identification with Bide. Bide is the lake. It's our community, defines our community, our nation, and our universe. Wakan is sacred. Bide Wakan, the sacred water, the sacred lake. Dowa, that place of dwelling, the dwellers of the sacred lakes. That is our genesis. That is who we are. Just like you have your identification. Water also defines relationships. Mini Wachoni, I use that word, the water of life in our language. And you have your own word on that bottle, Nibi. With our Ojibwe people, they have that same word too. I don't know, I hope I didn't put either not enough eyes or one eye too much, but but we're all related. Very important word to us. You may have heard it if you travel in the ceremonial circuits that they have these days. You heard that word, Mitakioase. It's a very important word. And the Ojibwe people, one of the sisters that's my same identification with the Bear Clans people, Winona Leduc, She has a word, can't pronounce it in her Ojibwe language, about we are all related. But that's something that talks about who we are, that we're tied to everything, animate and inanimate, even the rocks. Even these things that scientists, Western scientists, have defined and classified. Oh, that's organic or inorganic. It's all connected, and it was given here by the Creator. This is indigenous knowledge that I'm talking about, that water connects and it regulates. That's the regulator, is just water. With that air and that water, they're related. They're medakiyawase. As we started to do this work, we met with people who are indigenous of the islands of the Pacific. We met with the Maori people in New Zealand. And we learned something. I learned something in this when one of their spiritual elders from New Zealand said, water is the sacred mat of life, like a mat that you lay out. And that kind of struck out at me. I said, what do you mean by that? And he talked about, for a long time, like 2 hours, like talking to some of our elders, go on and on and on. But woven into what he was talking about is something that I related to in our identification of who we are as the Wakantawa, and our relationship to the waters and the lakes. It's the same thing. But I forget about the oceans, that there's a significant role that the oceans have throughout the world that we call Inamaka, Mother Earth, is the oceans. And that this is very important, to protect the oceans, the sacred mat of life. We also believe that water nourishes the land and the circle of life. Water is the physical form of spirit. Some of this we gain knowledge through our medicine people, our elders. Some of this is sacred language. We have our people that work in the spiritual realm, they have a sacred language. And they talk about the physical form of spirit. Then, of course, water circulates through the sky, earth, surface, and all things. And I've even heard, and this is bewildering to some of Western scientists, they say also water circulates into the universe and to the stars. Think about that. We started a Water is Life initiative. We found that all our work that we're doing, whether it's dealing with mineral extraction, the mining, the oil, gas, and now CBMs, coal bed methane, just dealing with the amount of water that they extract in order to squeeze out the oil that they need, the gas that they need. And then the wastewater, the magnitude of the water that they don't know what they're going to do with the wastewater that they pump out in coal bed methane. But they have developers now approaching our native people, Alaska, Canada, and United States. Coal bed methane is connected to this water. It may be over there in Alberta, but what they do in Alberta affects the water right here in Yellow Quill. That may be bewildering to some hydrologists in the Western science, but it is connected like the mat of life with the oceans. Even with energy and climate justice that we're involved with, we find water is an issue. Toxics and environmental health, dams, tribal environmental protection infrastructure. In the States, we are asserting our rights as First Nations to develop our own water and air quality standards, to be able to develop our own environmental native laws to protect our territories and to apply those. We have our own environmental specialists that we're developing. Not every reserve, not every band, but yes, we're starting with that. Deforestation and agriculture is also tied to water. Urban sprawl and rural growth. The water, if there's concerns with waterborne illnesses. What causes that? Is it related to agriculture? Is it related to the farming? What is causing that as well? So we find in all of our work that water is connected to our work. So that's why we committed ourselves to work on water. So taking issues that we heard like at Yellow Quill, issues concerning water quality, access to safe drinking water, taking issues of water rights, concerns over privatization, these certain different aspects of the issues around water. We started to put our ears to the ground to listen to our people. And our goal was a couple years ago to develop statements that are statements of our position as Native people. And we started to do that, working with some people in British Columbia like Art Manuel, like Jeanette Armstrong with the Nocquin Center, working with Priscilla City here. And there was a declaration that was developed in July 2001 at the International Conference on Water for People and Nature. We had, by coincidence, a meeting right after that in Penticton, BC. We had over 1,000 Indigenous people who came, and we developed a water declaration. Basically, it was endorsing the one in July 2001. That's available if you need a copy of that. And then with that, which is our position here in North America, we took this and worked at the international level at the Earth Summit. There was an Earth Summit in 1992, the Earth Summit. And 2002 was 10 years after that, the World Summit on Sustainable Development. The plan of implementation of the International Indigenous Peoples Summit in Kimberley. We had representation there from Canada, United States, all over the world. And we developed also a position on water there written within the plan of implementation. The World Summit on Sustainable Development is really critical in this work that you're working on here, because it deals with some issues that are very important to you here, as well as your Indigenous brothers and sisters throughout the world. Joji Cariña here is from the Philippines. She is of a tribe. She speaks her tribal language. They have their tribal ways in the Philippines. She's been involved in the World Commission on Dams to develop guidelines so that we wouldn't have any more of these large dam projects that would devastate our lands and our ecosystems and our communities. I found out the water issues and the commitments that the world leaders made at the World Summit on Sustainable Development to address this issue, that 1.1 billion people do not have access to safe drinking water. This struck out at me because we're dealing with that same issue back home. 2.5 billion do not have appropriate hygiene facilities. And that there are 5 to 10 million deaths per year related to water issues. And they said that one of the main causes of this is poverty. As Indigenous peoples that were there, we stood up to world leaders. We said, we understand what this is all about because it's happening back home. We had to say at the international level, when we looked over at the Canadian delegation that represents the nation of Canada, we looked over at the delegation that represents the United States. We said, it's very sad that we have to stand here on the international level and tell you that we are also impacted, that our people are dying from diseases in our water, that we don't have access to water, that it's a human right, that we should have a country that respects the right of our Indigenous peoples and should be providing services to address these issues. So the government of Canada and the United States, they say, whoa, 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 that's a domestic issue. we can work on that back home. This is an international meeting. We said, yes, it is an international meeting, but these are international issues. So we stood in alliance with many other non-government organizations and developing countries who were concerned about this issue and said this is a human right issue. That it's not just an issue of developing countries, but it's also an issue in developed countries of the North. And that there's disenfranchised communities, that there are people who do not have access to safe drinking water. And it's tied to self-determination and land rights. There's a report from this. It's available, www.tateba.org. I will make that available to Hans and Sue. But there is a report from this if you want to get a report of the plan and implementation. One of our elders from Rosebud, South Dakota, she teases us. She says, we're all part of the WWW nation. So we're all part of this new nation of WWWs. And part of this strategy, again, on the position on working on water issues, a platform as Indigenous peoples, is many of us went to Kyoto, Japan, at the Third World Water Forum. Now, the Third World Water Forum is not a United Nations initiative, but United Nations people are there. And we found, and at the World Water Forum, there's a lot of sanitation, a lot of water systems people there. I don't know if I've seen some of the vendors, but if you're a vendor and you're selling water filtration systems, the World Water Forum is where you need to go as well. This issue of billions of people that do not have access to safe drinking water, like the presentation yesterday, the people in the other parts of the world that do not have water, it's a serious issue. So the Kyoto Water Forum is a mechanism for water ministers from every country of the world, from engineers, hydrologists, and civil society to come together to address this issue. Indigenous peoples were there. And we developed the Indigenous Peoples Kyoto Water Declaration. This is the first global statement on water and is utilized as an organizing tool. You can utilize this statement to reinforce the work that you need to do as you work with Indian Affairs to get the services you need. I'm not going to read this, but this is just the preamble. This is the first part, because as we talk as Indigenous people, we have to talk about our relationship to the sacred. We have to educate the world about what is our relationship to water. A lot of this I heard the past couple of days. Talks about the availability and purity of water. We had Native people that literally cried as they heard testimonies of other people from other parts of the world because we understood what they're going through. But also at the World Water Forum, they recognize another terminology is the cultural diversity out there about water. No matter what part of the world, what race, what ethnic group, is that we all have a cultural relationship to water. And the World Water Forum recognized the value of cultural diversity and the significance that we have to this discussion. It really focused on ethical frameworks for water policy. Again, Canada was there. Your representatives of Canada are at these meetings, and they're negotiating. They're negotiating on a lot of these issues. We're doing a lot of alliance building with non-Indigenous groups. I'll call them the Water Allies Movement. Council Canadians, Polaris Institute, Public Citizens, Water Allies Network is a new network of grassroots communities, non-native, white communities, African American communities, all people of color communities in the States, formed Water Ally Network. And we're connecting with communities globally, north and south. So what you're doing here is part of a global movement of people coming together to talk about water. I think that's one of the most important things I wanted to convey in my presentation. Yet you're not alone in this. That there are allies, there are other people that can help you push your agenda. And there also was part of this alliance building was the planning for the People's World Water Forum in India. And this meeting to plan this was actually held in Cancun at the WTO, World Trade Organization meeting. And I have some photographs of our networking with the indigenous peoples there in Mexico. This is a panel, a presentation of some of our indigenous leaders. I don't know who that character is way at the end. He's wearing the same shirt as me. These are some of the women from Mexico, Mayan women. They came with the farmers delegation. And everything that they talked about was water. The lack of availability of water. Some of their areas they can't get water. It's one little spigot, and that serves about a couple dozen families. The climate issues, the drought conditions, water is not available anymore. Priscilla was down there. And the planning of this meeting took place, the start of this planning, this meeting took place in Cancun. And there was a declaration that was developed in Delhi, in New Delhi, India, the Declaration of the People's World Water Forum. And also the indigenous peoples that were there, Darlene Sanderson, Cree from Manitoba, she lives in British Columbia, she was there. She's been working on a curriculum on water that talks about a lot of issues you're dealing with here. She wasn't able to come, but she's willing to share that curriculum with you all. And I think she's made it available to the Safe Drinking Water Foundation as well. And we took part in the World Social Forum in Mumbai, India. Some of you may recognize it as Bombay. And indigenous peoples, we did presentations there as well. Where is this leading where we're at right now? Is all the commitments that the government, the world leaders made in Johannesburg, South Africa, at the World Summit on Sustainable Development. As we came together as non-government organizations, as indigenous peoples, as representatives of the governments, everyone is saying, where is this going to end? That we all understood the issues around global change, the compounding issues from toxics to climate to poverty. What are we going to do to make sure that water is available to those billions of people that don't have access to water? These are not easy answers. But everyone made a commitment that we have to do something. And out of that was a plan, an implementation plan. I feel it wasn't strong enough, but there was compromise and negotiations. But there's commitments that world leaders made in Johannesburg that impact what's going on, whether it's Saddle Lake, whether it's Gordon First Nations, whether it's Grassy Narrows in Ontario, or whether it's our communities, our indigenous community in Bolivia. There were commitments that were made, and we're going to stay involved and make sure that those commitments that were made to hold the governmental leaders of the world accountable. And so there's different thematic issues that are on the schedule during the next 12 years. And this past year, 2004 and 2005, the issue on the table is water, sanitation, and human settlement. And in your three-ring binder, I made available the whole document of our Indigenous people's discussion paper. Our network was involved with developing that. And it talks about the issues and concerns around sanitation, access to safe drinking water. We use some of the statistics here in Canada. We use statistics all over to lay our case that Indigenous peoples need to be considered. Our issues need to be considered at the international level. These are some of the statements in that in that position paper. We talked about the issues around lack of safe and adequate water supply, lack of proper disposal systems. We talked about the lack of infrastructure in our programs. This is connected to health issues as well, and it's connected to safe housing. So hopefully the work that we're doing at the international level does trickle down back to the domestic, back to Canada, back to Indian affairs. Because Canada wants to make itself look good in the international community, that it is a defender of human rights. But as other governments says, but you had some people from your own country that said they don't have access to safe drinking water. That affects and impacts Canada's negotiation globally. So they get back home and they say, so-and-so on the phone, we got to do something because we had someone from Yellow Quill, or we had somebody testifying, talking about the issues. Action does happen from the international down, okay? These are some of the issues we deal with in the States. Some 36% of our Indian homes lack water systems. In Alaska, it's a big issue in Alaska. 89 of the 192 Alaska Native villages have to walk their water. They have honey buckets. Anyone know what honey buckets are? Just imagine what a honey bucket is, a little bucket, a slop pail. Some of us, just past generation in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, gets cold in the winter time. So yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. But we also find the importance of our traditional knowledge. Important to develop partnerships with our scientists who understand our issues and our needs, like with Hans here. Partnerships with other people, other scientists, to come together between traditional knowledge holders and Western scientists to find solutions to these water-related problems. Again, to hold these governments and corporations, to work with them, but also not to compromise our positions of informed consent, these different things that we need to be involved in decision-making. And also to put forward a self-determination right to water agenda. That's what you're doing here. You're reaffirming yourself as First Nations. You have a right to water, and you do. That's part of our self-determination. Maybe another level is to really to have full authority to implement our programs and standards, guideline, what do you call it? Whether you call it guidelines or standards, maybe you can develop your own standards as First Nations. Apply your ability as sovereigns to develop your own water codes. And those jurisdictions outside of your reserves have to comply. Our customary uses of water. Also, self-determination talks about our spiritual relationship to water as well. Developing goals into realistic goals, national targets. These are some things that we need to do, we must do. Financial resources. We would do what we can as Indigenous Environmental Network to put pressure where pressure is due appropriately on the government of Canada to make sure that there's financial resources available for you to develop your water programs, to implement them and to maintain them. I'm going to go forward and leave one of the things I was thinking about past couple of days that's a really good tool for our tribes in the States is forming tribal coalitions. And Minnesota is Intertribal Water Rights Coalition in the Missouri River Basin. Starts from Montana all the way down to Kansas. They've been able to form a coalition with over 28 tribes. These tribes control over 15 million acres of land within the watershed of the Missouri River. This is a vast drainage system. And by getting together as a coalition of tribes, have been able to gain political strength, one voice, as they push forward a legal and administrative and economic agenda to manage their water resources. They are dealing with the issues around water quality, to develop a tribal infrastructure which takes funding, which takes lobbying efforts to get the necessary monies to do this work. But also they're hiring staff that represents the tribes and works with the tribes on the water issues so that they have technical staff that can advise the tribes when it comes to what is the proper filtration program, treatment program that you need. There's many systems out there. There's many characteristics that you're dealing with in your local community. One answer doesn't fit all, as you learned the past couple of days. Do you have the money for a consultant? Where do you get this expert advice if you don't have it within your tribe? Do you get it from Indian Affairs? Where do you get that from? The coalition developed a mechanism to where they raise monies to do that, and they have that expertise within their coalition that works with the 28 members of that tribe. So that's just a suggestion I'm offering. As they're developing integrated water management programs that talk about protection of our food security, our right to food, protects our right to practice our culture, maintain our language, it's survival. This is a picture from our Great Lakes from Minnesota. Dakotas, they say we're not ricers, but we're ricers. A lot of our people don't do that anymore, but we are the eastern woodland Dakotas. Environmental justice means respect and protection of the sacred of water and able to practice our culture. So thank you.